I'm Megan, 32, and last month, my mother, Mortgages, sent me a text message. My parents gave their multi-million-dollar construction company, family home, and investment to me 3 years ago. Ryan, my younger brother, told me that he earned everything I spent 15 years assisting with the development of our family business while Ryan partied in his 20s, and when my father informed me that I was receiving nothing. Your brother deserves it, they said, and they're drowning in debt before I. Let me know where you're watching from, tell you what occurred next, hit the like button, and join me on my journey to advocate for myself as I grew up in our expansive. I always felt as though I was living in Ryan's colonial house in the Boston suburbs. My grandfather William Patterson was the first person in our family to begin Patterson Construction in 1965 in his garage using only a strong will and a. He transformed it into a reputable neighborhood business using a pickup truck. When my father Thomas took over in the early. When Ryan was born, I was 7 years old. In the 1990s, he turned it into a regional powerhouse with contracts throughout New England. In the hospital waiting area, I recall my father's face beaming as the nurse said, "It's a boy." That moment set the tone for family dynamics for the following 25 years, finally a Patterson to continue. Dad said the family name as though I hadn't been here for the last 7 years ago. There was a slight variation in how we were treated, but unmistakable. Ryan's father gave him a bespoke playhouse on his 5th birthday. In the same year that the company crew built in our backyard, I received a cake and a gift card to a bookshop for my 12th birthday. Mom used to say, "That's nice, honey," before focusing on me when I brought home my report card with straight A's. Returning to Ryan's math C- and complimenting him on his progress, my mother Nancy wasn't. Despite being overtly biased, she allowed my father's preference. She was the peacekeeper who was constantly attempting to. "Your father just has traditional values," she would whisper after things were handled with extra care while Dad wasn't watching. "He doesn't intend anything by showing preference, especially in hard situations." By the time I got to high school, I had devised a plan for excellence. If I couldn't gain their love by being here, maybe success would suffice. The secret I used to become president of the Future Business Leaders of America was to join every club pertaining to business chapter and became a salutator, while Ryan hardly kept the air conditioner running. In my sophomore year, I overheard my dad spending more time and energy on average than on extracurricular activities. "Boys will be boys," Dad observed laughingly, speaking to Ryan after he had been discovered drinking at a school dance. "Just don't get caught the next time." 3 months prior, I had been grounded for a week for staying late and missing curfew by 15 minutes. When it came time to make college options, I, in particular, decided to major in business management with a concentrate on construction management because I believed it would ultimately win my attention, not because it was my passion. I intended to earn my father's respect by demonstrating my commitment to the family business. Ryan, meanwhile, alternated between. The summers before my senior year, I tried 3 different majors before deciding on communications because it was simple. I came early, stayed late, and learned everything I could about my internship at Patterson Construction in college. Dad seldom acknowledged my estimation of project management and client relations. I was given the task of filing documents while Ryan, who was home from his sophomore year, was invited to client meetings and work. When I asked why my brother was attending, Dad stated that Ryan needs to learn the company from the ground up. While I was organizing the supply closet and attending executive meetings, the irony was totally. I loved our family business and recognized its promise despite everything. I sincerely hoped to contribute to its future. During the summer and holidays, I worked a variety of jobs around the organization, and the accounting department taught me the names of every employee. I was able to comprehend the construction team's worries, procedures, and suggestions for enhancements on Christmas of my. In my final year of college, I gave my dad a thorough business plan outlining how Patterson Construction would grow into green building techniques. I had devoted months to studying market trends, tax breaks, and possible new customers. Bases. He looked at the cover and remarked, "We'll see." He then put it aside. Despite Ryan's lack of enthusiasm, he spent 2 hours in the den that night learning how to read blueprints. She patted my hand and whispered, "Your father just connects better with Ryan." Mom tried to comfort me afterward. "He doesn't know how to relate to a daughter in business." I brought up the fact that a number of significant. She simply shrugged and shifted the conversation by the time I mentioned that women owned the construction companies in our neighborhood. I knew I would never be the favorite when I graduated, but I was still motivated to show my value by outcomes. I felt that deeds were more powerful than words, and ultimately my contributions would be indisputable, but now when I look back, I see how foolish that hope was. No amount of favoritism can be overcome by excellence, particularly when it is supported by conventional gender norms. I never gave up in spite of everything, which may have been my greatest strength or my biggest flaw. Reluctant to abandon a family and a business I loved, despite all the indications that my place was. I worked 3 part-time jobs, but my brothers would always come first in both. Throughout college to cover my costs, but Ryan was given complete financial assistance from his parents. With a new automobile every 2 years and a lavish apartment, my parents provided his tuition, accommodation, and meal plan, as well as providing him with a sizable monthly stipend that surpassed the earnings of many recent grads in their first employment. When I questioned my parents about why they refused to provide me with financial support, Dad answered, "You must understand the importance of diligence." As if Ryan hadn't, I received a double diploma from summa cum laude at his graduation. Ryan, a construction management and business administration major, barely made it with a 2.3 GPA in. After 5.5 years, Dad made a toast at my graduation dinner. 6 months later, at Ryan's graduation, to Megan, who always follows the book, he publicly sobbed for my kid, who will continue the Patterson family name in the future. Our company when, upon graduation, I formally joined Patterson Construction. Despite my skills, I was assigned to an entry-level estimating position, and my starting pay was lower than newly hired employees with less knowledge. You must learn every facet of the company from the ground up. Dad clarified that 3 weeks later, Ryan was placed in a newly constructed vice. In my first year, I had the position of President of Client Relations, which came with a corner office and corporate car. Found that using more efficient materials might save around $400,000. Ordering procedures, I developed a spreadsheet that records past prices from different vendors and found. Dad, when I presented my findings at a management meeting, we were able to negotiate higher rates. Before Ryan's presentation about holding a corporate golf tournament, he nodded and said, "Interesting." Despite the ongoing disappointment, I kept doing well and gained recognition from. When material shipments were delayed, I discovered that project managers were the ones who could resolve issues. Options I had ready to contact in case the subcontractors didn't show up. Cultivated connections with everyone on our largest projects, from the lead foreman to the receptionist. One specific project that sticks in my mind, we were constructing a complex of medical offices with a strict deadline and significant fines. Our project manager resigned after 2 months of construction due to the delayed finish. Ryan was meant to step in, but he was on a 3-week vacation in Europe with pals, and his father was in a frenzy. For 6 weeks in a row, I worked 14-hour days before offering to take over. I rearranged the construction timetable and renegotiated with subcontractors to maximize crew and individual time. Oversaw crucial project phases, and we finished the construction 2 days early and within budget. The client was so impressed that they hired us right away for their next expansion. I participated in the completion celebration. The background is the client's CEO particularly requested me to cut the ribbon alongside Dad and Ryan, who had returned just in time. Dad heard and glanced briefly as he shook my hand and stated, "This wouldn't have happened without you." Uneasy, then gave Ryan a shoulder pat and remarked, "The Patterson men know how to deliver." In the meanwhile, I lived simply in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment while Ryan used his executive salary to buy a beachfront condo. Pay package: I drove a 10-year-old Honda and packed lunch from home, while Ryan drove a company-leased BMW and handled client lunch expenses. Created my savings account as Ryan accrued credit card debt, which my parents paid off on a regular basis. Due in large part to the systems and client relationships I established, the business kept expanding, and I established a new division, concentrating on environmentally friendly building practices that drew high-profile clientele who were worried about the effects. These initiatives increased our profit margins and enhanced our standing as a forward-thinking company. Dad claimed that, despite originally rejecting my request, Ryan's contributions to industry magazines were less. One, he enchanted people as the face of golf events and charity galas. The wives of customers at holiday gatherings, he was attractive for business promotion. Materials, his projects usually went over budget and behind schedule, necessitating the involvement of other managers. Typically, I would intervene and save them. In my 5th year at the company, we faced a serious crisis after Ryan accepted the design. A large commercial enterprise was about to fail. Modifications without considering the structural ramifications. The client threatened to sue us an hour. Ryan was conveniently ill the week this all surfaced, so I spent 2 weeks bargaining with him because his reputation was on the line. In order to establish a solution with the client, architects, and engineers, I obtained more funding, hired specialist subcontractors, and oversaw the cleanup operations directly. The project was saved, but at a lower profit. After everything was said and done, Dad called me into his office. You've done a great job of resolving the issue, and for a little minute I believed recognition was finally coming. However, Ryan made a mistake and should consult me before making such large financial commitments in the future, he remarked. However, he's learning, and we must help him as he assumes his responsibility. I sat there. 10 years of effort and I was still receiving treatment left me speechless. As my brother's subordinate, who didn't bother to show up when things went tough, that evening for the first time, I gave quitting the company some real thought, but I had spent too. There was so much of me in Patterson Construction that leaving seemed like giving up. In addition, where would I go? The family company is also my business, or so I believed until the night that everything changed. Everything started out smoothly enough when Mom said that Dad had a big announcement and invited Ryan and me to Sunday supper. I thought it had to do with our planned new office building or maybe our move into the commercial real estate market. I brought a bottle of Dad's favorite and arrived 15 minutes early as usual, having been investigating the estate market. Scotch, the home where I grew up, was consistently well kept and looked the same. 25 years of business in a 4-bedroom colonial with the Patterson Construction sign prominently displayed along the driveway. My parents' success had enabled them to upgrade the property with a sunroom pool and a lot of landscaping, which I still. Ryan didn't apologize to his mother when he arrived 20 minutes late, thinking of his home. Fussed over him as though he had come from the war instead of the short trip from his condo, and Dad grinned proudly when stated that he recently paid a deposit for a yacht, but no one inquired about my recent contract negotiation victory. That would guarantee employment with the company for the following 3 years. Dad cleared his throat and lifted his glass over supper. I've been considering Patterson Construction's future, he said. Since I'm not getting any younger, it's time to strategy for succession. My heart raced. After 15 years of hard work, this was the moment I had been aiming for. Dad must have appreciated my efforts and the dedication that your mother and I had shown. Determined that it was time to begin taking a break from daily operations. He went on, we want to travel and enjoy our golden years and observe how the company prospers under the new management. I sat up. Therefore, Dad said, mentally going over the transition plan I had been secretly creating for years. We've decided to transfer ownership of Patterson Construction to Ryan effective, he stated, turning to face Ryan. I grabbed the edge of the table as soon as the room began to spin. Furthermore, Dad went on as like he hadn't just destroyed my world, we'll be moving the house in our. Ryan will also require investment accounts in order to ensure the company's continued expansion. What about Megan? The first clue that this might not have been a majority decision was Mom's quiet question. Dad hardly looked at me. In appreciation of Megan's years with the company, we are providing her with a substantial severance payout that includes 3 months' income. And her work vehicle, that's it. After 15 years of searching for my voice, I receive 3 months' salary while Ryan receives everything. Your brother is deserving, Father. He's a Patterson man, he stated firmly, signaling that the issue had been resolved. I'm a Patterson too, therefore the business should continue using a family name, I remarked. Dad said dismissively, until you marry, trembling, besides Ryan has a vision. Don't worry, sis, Ryan grinned across the table, for the company's future. May be able to find you a position in the new company, perhaps in human resources or something similar. Mom glanced at her dish when I looked to her for encouragement, saying, we simply want. What is best for the business, she whispered. What is best for the business? I got up and knocked my chair back. Ryan has no idea how to run this company, he has never finished a balance sheet and is unable to read one. Project on schedule, but half of the crews won't cooperate with him since he lacks expertise. Dad slammed his hand on the table, saying, that's enough. This decision is final. I questioned in tears, did you ever intend to include me in the company's future? The documentation was already prepared. DOD's face softened a little when he threatened, Megan. You're smart, you'll land. On your feet, yet a Patterson is necessary to lead Patterson Construction. I responded sourly, don't make this about tradition, a male Patterson. Gender Ryan added it's about who Dad believes will continue his legacy. Looked at my family around the table, my dad was adamant about his choice, and my mother was unwilling. Ryan hardly contained his victory after 32 years of trying to prove it in order to challenge him. My world collapsed around me, surrounded by caring individuals who would never appreciate me equally. And congratulations on your inheritance, I replied icily to my parents as I congratulated them on their retirement. I walked out after saying to Ryan, I hope you all get exactly what you deserve. I drove away without turning around, disregarding my mother's pleas for me to come back. Let the tears fall at last, not only for the lost inheritance but also for the acknowledgement I would never get for the spent years attempting to win affection that ought to have been given without conditions. The following morning, I resigned. Dad phoned me right away to remind me of the non-compete agreement in my job, not to apologize. Contract for 2 years, you are not allowed to work for any competitor within 100 miles. As though that were his first priority, he answered, I wouldn't dream of it. 15 years of work fit into 2 hours, so I cleaned out my office on a Sunday when no one would be there before hanging up cardboard boxes, and as I gave the business I had helped create one final glance, I vowed never to let someone else's incapacity to recognize my value dictate it. The hardest month I've ever rented a furnished apartment in Chicago was the first month after quitting Patterson Construction. From Boston as far as I could go and still work in construction. Every morning when I got up, every night, I questioned my choice and reminded myself that staying would have gradually crushed my spirit. I took 2 weeks to grieve, I scribbled harsh things, shouted into pillows, and cried. I started working on starting again and rebuilding my life after sending letters to my family that I never sent. The severance package barely paid for my security deposit and first month's rent, so I had to take money out of my savings to equip my apartment. Simply and established my new company, Patterson Consulting. As a tiny act of rebellion, I came up with LinkedIn profiles and business cards that highlight my experience without referring to it as family. I started making cold calls for company and going to networking events every day. I introduced myself to every individual in the Chicago construction sector, ranging from developers to subcontractors. Most doors stayed firmly closed. It was difficult for an unknown woman to provide construction consulting in a field that was controlled by men. My first customer arrived in utter despair. I don't have a midsize. The developer needed quick assistance because they had sacked their project manager in the middle of the 3-month project. Over budget and over schedule, I offered to work at a discounted rate with an incentive structure attached to. I spent 6 weeks working from 6 in the morning until midnight to get the project back on track. I rearranged the construction timetable, renegotiated with subcontractors, and found expensive errors in the initial plans. We were able to minimize the delays in half by the end and find enough savings to make up for the earlier overruns. The developer was so impressed that he recommended me to 2 colleagues. All of a sudden I had a modest clientele and good recommendations, so I carved out a place for myself. When things go wrong, I position myself as a problem solver, not the construction consultant you contact. Battling head-to-head with well-known project management companies 4 months into my new business, I got a call from. I resigned as the head estimator for Martin Chin Patterson Construction. Ryan dismissed Dolores and Jim last week without providing a preface, stating they were. I couldn't continue after 30 years with the company because it was too costly. Martin informed me of the modifications Ryan had made, including the replacement of seasoned project managers with his fraternity brothers. Trustworthy subcontractors were replaced by less expensive ones. Ryan deemed the sustainable building section I had established to be too complex, therefore it was dissolved. Place is collapsing, Martin said. Your dad is attempting to avoid touching anything, but he appears physically. I thanked Martin for the information, but he always seems sick when he comes into the office. Kept my distance and didn't care about their business anymore, but I couldn't help but feel validated by the news. I felt professional validation rather than personal satisfaction. Whether my family realized it or not, my abilities and experience had been invaluable to Patterson Construction. As my firm grew during my first year in Chicago, I brought on 2 assistants and relocated to a little yet. In a formal office setting, I established a reputation for integrity and output. I developed cooperative ties with clients, in contrast to my father, who supported hierarchical management. Instead of dictating conditions, I engaged them in decision-making and provided detailed explanations of my ideas. Spoke especially well to female project owners and developers, a rising group in the field. By my 15th month in Chicago, I had a customer waiting list and was thinking about growing my team. In the meantime, I received reports from past coworkers presented Patterson Construction in an increasingly negative light after Ryan won multiple significant contracts by underbidding rivals who were unaware that the projects would be a loss-making venture. Quality problems surfaced as inexperienced. Due to delays and flaws, 2 significant clients filed claims against management who failed to adequately monitor subcontractors. I tried to keep a professional distance from these issues, but I couldn't help but feel sad for Patterson. My grandfather had left a legacy of construction, and hundreds of families relied on the business to support themselves. Ryan's innocent workers who had been devoted for decades were also being harmed by poor management, in addition to our family. Barbara, my parents' 20-year neighbor, sent me an email one evening stating that there were rumors regarding my parents' financial struggles. They had lost their country club membership and canceled their yearly trip, and the Patterson brand was removed from the company trucks. Instead of being conspicuously exhibited, they were just white and barely identifiable. That evening, I almost called my mother, but I restrained myself because they had already made up their minds and trusted me with everything. Ryan thought he was more deserving than me because he shared their gender and DNA. Years of proven ability, thus they were responsible for any repercussions from that choice. Instead, I focused my efforts on developing my company, branching out into preventative consulting to assist developers in avoiding the I created a training program for new project managers based on the expensive errors I had frequently observed in problematic projects. Instead than relying on theoretical concepts from textbooks, I engaged 3 additional advisors, all of whom were female and had a wealth of building experience who, by the end of my 2nd year, had encountered comparable obstacles in conventional enterprises. In the Midwest, Patterson Consulting had established itself as a reputable name in Chicago. I had demonstrated to myself that my accomplishments at Patterson Construction were not a coincidence or that, if anything, I would have excelled there in spite of the challenges because of nepotism put in my way. I purchased a modest yet tasteful condo in a historic structure. When I was unpacking my things, I came upon a picture of my first actual home that was really mine. In front of my grandfather's first Patterson Construction truck, his face conveyed the same sense of pride and determination I was feeling at the time. I realized I was continuing his actual legacy via the principles of perseverance, hard labor, and integrity that he had exemplified, rather than through a building's name. I finally felt at peace with my new path that night, and I slept better than I had in years. I had no idea that my past would suddenly resurface in my meticulously rebuilt existence the following morning. Ryan's management style at Patterson Construction is akin to a toddler banging on blocks while playing, tearing down existing buildings for the sole purpose of destroying them without any intention of restoring them within the first 6. After months of leadership, he had implemented reforms that reversed decades of meticulous company development. His first significant the choice was to fire the company's established accounting firm and replace them with the brother of his college roommate. The newly licensed accountant was eager to please and had recently obtained his CPA license. Inadequately tracked job costs across several projects due to a lack of knowledge about the characteristics of the building sector. The company's records were so chaotic by the time tax season rolled around that they had to engage a forensic accountant at. Ryan's next clever move, at great expenditure, was to reorganize the management team. He removed the roles of 3 project managers who had over 20 years of experience with the organization. Said they were unreceptive to new ideas in. For pals from his fraternity days were employed by him for their place, none of them had any prior construction experience. He made new executive positions with 6-figure salaries, such as Director of Brand Experience and Chief Innovation Officer, and Business Automobiles. The Patterson Construction Office, which was formerly an example of effective operation, changed into. Ryan set up a ping-pong table and kegerator in the conference room, which looked like a frat house. Staff meetings on Monday morning were swapped out for vision sessions, which Ryan claimed would foster innovation. Would talk endlessly about his plans to grow the business as his recently hired executives excitedly nodded. In the meantime, real construction projects failed due to inadequate supervision. My green construction division, which generated about 30% of the company's income, was dissolved. due to Ryan's perception that the certification criteria were overly complex. Long-standing customers who had transferred their business elsewhere after explicitly looking for sustainable building choices from Patterson Construction. Ryan took an equally poor approach to gaining new business, cutting his bid. Without knowing the true expenses, Patterson Construction started lowering rates to undercut rivals. Contracts that, before the first shovel touched earth, were assured to be losing money when estimators attempted to addressing the issue Ryan raised, claiming they were pessimistic and failed to see the wider picture of expanding their market share. The company's fleet, which was once meticulously maintained, began to deteriorate as his clients' development car equipment started. Ryan shifted the maintenance budget to lease a new Porsche, malfunctioning on construction sites, resulting in delays that led to contract penalty clauses. Subcontractors who had performed for generations, they had to wait 90 days for payment from Patterson Construction rather than the usual 30. Ryan was forced to recruit an unknown because many people refused to take on new Patterson projects. By the 9-month point, subcontractors' work quality was at best patchy. After decades of prudent management, the company's cash reserves had. Ryan started using the company's line of credit to pay for routine operating costs after it was exhausted. Interest payments alone in construction management were costing my parents thousands of dollars per month. They had intended to enjoy a nice retirement but were dragged back into the company more and more as issues grew. Dad would scoff at glaring quality problems when visiting construction sites, yet be reluctant to. When suppliers started phoning the house, Mom took over accounts payable once more, undermining his son's authority. Requesting money, but they continued to make excuses for Ryan's performance. His father would be worried. When friends inquired why Patterson Trucks, Mom would answer that the market is difficult at the moment. Were vanishing from nearby construction projects. The company's 3-generation-old reputation was quickly being damaged. The company's bonding caused contractors who had previously chosen Patterson for their projects to start seeking elsewhere. Capacity. Due to financial concerns, its capacity to get the performance bonds needed for larger projects was reduced. 12 months into Ryan's tenure, the first lawsuit was filed, limiting the size of contracts they could bid on due to instability. Synopsis. When structural problems surfaced in a recently finished project, a commercial client filed a lawsuit for significant damages. An investigation into the office building showed that Ryan had given his approval to use inferior materials instead of those outlined in the agreement to reduce expenses. The business's insurance provider first rejected the claim, stating, "Intentional neglect when an apartment complex Patterson had constructed developed substantial." The cause of the water damage was identified as incorrectly placed flashing is simple. Any seasoned project manager would have confirmed the building element. The settlement drained what remaining financial reserves of the business at the 15-month mark. Ryan made his most disastrous choice, using the company's remaining financing without seeking advice from financial consultants. Was he mistaken? My family's bad choices caused innocent workers to suffer. What are you saying? I suggested, come back as COO, and he replied, you have full authority to make whatever. Ryan will return to a business development role exclusively, and I am hesitant to give up my ownership stake, but adjustments are required. Could give you 20% of the business. I chuckled aloud. 20% of a business, that's your offer after I started a profitable firm from the ground up and Ryan pushed yours into the. Dad countered every week, and I answered, if you're serious, so I ended the call. Regarding my assistance, have your attorney draft documents transferring 51% of the company to me right away after the company's financial status is confirmed, else. I wish you success in the foreclosure. Megan, be sensible, Dad began. I'm being fair. You're requesting that I abandon a profitable company I founded in order to save another that you specifically stated I didn't deserve to own, and I'll speak with your mother about it. He said, at last, do that, and while you're talk to Ryan and let him know that his vacation is ended and that he will be working if I return. Whether it was directed by me or not, I hung up and sat in my quiet office. As darkness approached, I watched the Chicago lights come on. The chat had shaken me, but not because of their situation. However, based on how I responded to it 2 years ago, I would have hurried to assist right away, regardless of the terms. I now realize that I would have put the family business ahead of my own interests out of a misguided feeling of obligation. My value, I had created something worthwhile on my own terms, if my family so desired. They would need to properly recognize the importance of my abilities and experience before they could continue to give their all. And not getting anything in return, my mother texted me on my phone. "Tomorrow, our father will speak with the lawyer. Please assist us, Megan, as we are at a loss." Their dilemma had been simmering for months, and I had nowhere else to turn, so I left it unsolved. Wait another day as I thoroughly weighed my options. Business logic would inform my choice. Not a familial duty or emotional blackmail, but for the first time in our relationship, I had the power to. What would I do with it? 3 days after receiving the frantic call from my parents, I had 2 prepared paperwork in my briefcase when I boarded a flight to Boston. By my lawyer, one for a consulting contract and the other for a transfer of Patterson's majority interest. I didn't know which would be signed if I had rented a car or not. This circumstance necessitated the drive to maintain the professional distance rather than asking my parents to pick me up. It seemed unreal that their house, where I grew up, was in such poor condition, with overgrown vegetation and peeling. The Patterson construction sign beside the driveway was gone, and the woodwork was painted. My mother opened the door before I might knock and pull me into a hard hug that I didn't give back. My father was standing clumsily in the foyer, appearing older. And Ryan was much smaller than I had remembered. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he stated, "He's coming," and checked his watch. "Ought to arrive shortly." We proceeded to the living room, where bank and coffee table financial documents were strewn everywhere. Tax returns, court letters, and statements serve as tangible proof of their financial collapse. I said I needed to know exactly what I was walking before we started. I would like to view all bank statements, credit card bills, loan records, litigation, and tax notices. My parents took me through the catastrophe for the following 2 hours. The business had more than $3.7 million in debt with almost little left in assets, and suppliers were refusing to deliver. 3 significant clients have canceled contracts because of delays and quality problems without receiving money in advance. The family had a $780,000 mortgage, but I hadn't made any payments for 4 months. Where had all the money gone? Questioned, but I knew the answer already. Dad was hesitant, but Mom spoke up, and Ryan made some dubious choices. As if on cue, Ryan walked in the front door. He was tanned from his business vacation to Florida, and he paused briefly while wearing fancy sunglasses. He added in a false casual tone, "Nobody told me," when he met me at a family gathering. As Megan approached, I said, "Sit down, Ryan. We're talking about how you damaged a." In less than 2 years, a 3-generation family business made his face flush. "That's not fair market conditions, but I've seen the numbers, therefore I've interrupted. Is entirely related to ineptitude and embezzlement and has nothing to do with market conditions." He blustered, "Embezzlement, that's a serious accusation." I took a spreadsheet out of my briefcase. I had created an analysis of his personal expenses that were billed to the company's first-class country club memberships, flights, a boat, and a Florida apartment that were all bought using corporate money. While Ryan turned to our father for help since projects were failing and workers weren't getting paid, but Dad just stared at the CEO. Ryan attempted to compensate me on the floor, but not when the business is. I retorted, "That's textbook fraudulent conveyance, which might be illegal." Depending on how the money was recorded, his face lost color for what may have been the first time in his. Ryan came to the realization that he couldn't use charm or bluster to get out of a position. I've examined all of my remarks directed toward my parents, ignoring Ryan. There are 2 alternatives available. Option 1 is for me to enter as a consultant and charge my usual fees to create a restructuring strategy that you carry out. Option 2, I assume control, 51% of the business and complete power to implement whatever changes I think required. Ryan interrupted, "This is absurd. You can't just waltz in and take over my business, your business." I arched an eyebrow. "The business you managed. The business that is just a few weeks away from going bankrupt." "Megan is correct," Dad remarked softly. "We handed you every edge Ryan Resources has," and we all looked at him in shock. It was the first time I had ever heard my father criticize, "And you wasted every opportunity of authority." Ryan said directly, "We'll take option 2, and even Ryan was silenced by the shock. Ryan began to object, but Dad raised his hand and said, "It's completed, Ryan. You will cooperate completely if you desire to save your reputation or avoid legal issues." With whatever Megan chooses. With tears in her eyes, my mother nodded in accord. Without further explanation, my parents signed the ownership transfer forms after I shoved them over the table. Conversation suddenly, I was Patterson Construction's primary owner. Ryan inquired glumly, "Now what?" "Now the real work begins," I said, "tomorrow. At the office at 7 a.m. morning. Everyone, including you." Ryan. At 6:30 a.m. the following day, I reached Patterson Construction's headquarters. The structure that had previously been a source of pride for the family appeared worn out and neglected, and the documentation within was even worse. It was outdated and disorganized. PCs and vacant desks where longtime workers once sat. My parents arrived at 6:50, Ryan around 7:20, drinking coffee and without expressing regret for his ability to buy a nearby property for a projected expansion of headquarters. The timing couldn't have been more. Even worse, he paid far more than market value for the property within 6 months when the commercial real estate market was at its height. Values dropped, turning the business upside down on the debt. Ryan's personal expenditures went on unchecked. A boat, followed by a Florida vacation home. He traveled to the Caribbean and Las Vegas for company development. High-end restaurants and upscale hotels were using all of the company's credit cards, and Ryan's business was losing money. Started taking out short-term loans from my parents' personal funds, from their retirement funds, after which they mortgaged the long-paid-off family house, and finally liquidated investment accounts that were meant to support their retirement by the time they were 18 months old. My parents' comfortable retirement had turned into a financial nightmare, and the business was losing a lot of money every month. The family house, which was previously a sign of accomplishment, was stripped of their personal savings. Had a mortgage with unaffordable payments, and Dad, who had intended to spend his days playing golf, had returned to work. 68-year-old website attempting to save problematic projects through former coworkers. I was informed that my father was 10 years and 18 months old. My mother's strong stride had turned into a nervous shuffle due to anxiousness. Ryan's health problems include high blood pressure, sleeplessness, and bodily manifestations of stress. Staying in denial, he blamed the economy, demanding clients, and dishonest personnel. He continued to receive his executive compensation despite refusing to accept responsibility for the company's issues. The last straw was that the business was falling behind on the risks faced by normal employees. Occurred when the bank called the business's line of credit since it had several covenant violations and no money to settle them. And Patterson Construction faced impending insolvency with no remaining assets to pledge. My father turned the company my grandfather had founded from nothing into a major force in the area, and I had contributed to future modernization was just a few weeks away from collapsing. At that point, my mother's mortgage text messaged me, asking if we could speak. On a Tuesday, my mother arrived at 7:13 a.m. Mortgages due, can we chat about my initial reaction was to disregard it because, other from a generic Christmas greeting, I hadn't heard from her in almost 2 years. Card and birthday text, but I couldn't help but wonder what Mortgages did. I replied, even though the family home had been paid off for more than 10 years. 1?3 vanished right away, then vanished again. Returned at last. In order to support the business, we had to take out a mortgage. I set my phone down and went about my morning routine after making this month's payment. Professional coffee, shower, clothes, and the well-known beat made it easier for me to comprehend this unanticipated reminder of my past. By the time I arrived at my workplace, 3 more "Please, Megan" texts had arrived. Ryan insists it's only temporary, but we're in trouble. Dad won't acknowledge it, but we need assistance. I turned off the chat and concentrated on my meetings for the day. I had a perspective, 2 project site visits, a client meeting, and a proposal to complete my business. Was flourishing specifically as a result of my upholding professional boundaries and putting more emphasis on solutions than drama. Financial difficulties in my family weren't an emergency for me, but as the day went on, my father even sent a message by the afternoon saying, "We need to talk. Business matter." It was almost ironic that I was coming from a father who had essentially kicked me out of the family business. Hilarious. Following my most recent meeting, I sat in my office with a view of the Chicago cityscape and considered my options. Could keep ignoring them, which would be acceptable considering our past. Provide funds to pay the mortgage, allowing their dysfunction without tackling the root causes. I chose the third option because I could interact but establish clear boundaries. Out of professional curiosity more than a sense of duty to my family, I phoned my. At precisely 5:30 p.m., Megan's mother answered the first ring. Thank God I had appointments and had been waiting all day, so I remarked indifferently, what's going on with the mortgage? The subsequent 20-minute monologue was a financial catastrophe. The house had been mortgaged in order to obtain a business loan that had been used to compensate for losses on 3 significant projects when the company's credit was downgraded. Ryan had underbid, and the $4,300 monthly payment was significant for a couple whose Ryan's company loans from their personal accounts had completely destroyed their retirement income, and they are now 3 months behind. Mom acknowledged that if we don't catch up, the bank will begin foreclosure procedures next week. Where's? In response to my question, he's trying his best, Ryan stated in an unconvincing manner. Mom, I work in the same industry, and the market is difficult right now. Is expanding, but well-managed construction firms are unable to hire quickly enough to meet demand. This may cause another stop. When she eventually passed the phone, she remarked, your father would like to speak with you. Dad's voice had aged. With a slightly hesitant tone, the authoritative voice said, Megan, thank you for calling. Listening, I said neither hostile nor welcoming. He cleared his throat. The circumstances at Patterson Construction have gotten more complex. We are currently dealing with some short-term cash flow problems that have an impact on our own finances. What do you mean by transitory and complicated? I asked. What transpired during the course of the following hour was even worse than I had anticipated. The business was practically bankrupt. Ryan had hired and the bank had frozen their business accounts, and there were ongoing lawsuits from suppliers and clients. Sacked 3 CFOs in 18 months, each of whom resigned after realizing the depth of. Due to the financial mismanagement, workers had not been paid for 3 weeks. I inquired, where is Ryan now, because tax liens had been filed for unpaid payroll taxes. Reluctantly, Dad acknowledged that he is in Florida. At the condo, he says he is meeting with possible investors, but he disappeared. I concluded that he is most likely on his boat. Dad didn't say yes or no, but he did say, we need your help, Megan. I begged for more financial assistance, and he replied, we need you to come back to help us salvage what remains of the business. I almost dropped the phone following everything that transpired after. They wanted me to come back and clean up Ryan's mess, and you wanted me to save the business, so I gave him everything and I got nothing. Things you told me I wasn't worthy of participating in, and the resentment I believed I had dealt with suddenly surfaced. We all made a mistake, Dad added softly, but it's no longer just about us. For their livelihoods, 47 families rely on Patterson Construction. Those who trusted our family to rule properly and did nothing wrong. Was deftly using the guilt card to appeal to the sense of accountability he had given me. The worst thing. Being late, I met them in the conference room, which was still scratched but no longer had a ping-pong table. I started by explaining how this works. This is a rescue mission, not a family get-together. I'll base my choices on what's best for the company's existence, not on the sentiments of expectations. No one moved, so anyone who can't accept that should go now. First things first, Ryan, you are released from all financial and operational obligations as of right now. Right away, you will only work in client interactions under my close supervision, and your pay has been lowered to return the company automobile and match the other department heads' credit cards. Ryan began to object when the Florida condo was sold, but his father put a warning hand on him. His arm, sneering at me. Mom and Dad, you'll serve an advisory, he said. Capabilities alone, you possess valuable institutional knowledge, but you lack the power to make decisions. Retirement benefits are halted until the business turns a profit once more. My father was distressed, and my mother nodded. But didn't protest. I've spoken with important former workers who left or were fired under Ryan's direction. 7 have decided to come back, including Dolores Rodriguez and Martin Chin, who will take up their prior positions in estimating, and I presented the remainder of my reorganization plan to office management, renegotiating with having in-person meetings with unhappy customers, enforcing stringent financial controls, and selling. I explained that the recovery would be difficult and that non-essential assets will be used to create operating capital. Demanded sacrifices from everyone. I divided my time over the following 3 months between Chicago, where my assistant oversaw continuing Patterson consulting projects, and worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week in Boston, where I put the rescue plan into action. Every day of the week, I had to make tough choices like firing Ryan's fraternity members and ending costly office leasing. Although it took some time, we made steady progress. Arranged payment schedules with vendors who valued my standing in the field, and 2 significant clients consented to renew contracts with updated deadlines with my personal assurance of quality control. The bank underwent a restructuring. Loans based on our practical recovery strategy. Ryan surprised me by showing some beneficial when restricted to client connections alone and without financial authority, but he was nevertheless able to win over new customers by landing a number of modest but lucrative projects that helped keep cash flow stable. The trauma of almost losing everything appeared to humble him, but I was wary of his newfound. 6 months after the rescue effort began, Patterson Construction was steady, not thriving, but no longer at responsibility. In the face of an impending collapse, I had put in place procedures and training that enabled me to reduce my direct participation. My parents used the money they received from the sale of their overmortgaged property to downsize to a smaller house, pay off personal debt. In my case, I kept the controlling stake but hired an accomplished construction executive to manage daily tasks in Boston while I went back to my Chicago company. Full-time, I had demonstrated to myself and my family what I needed to. The biggest shift occurred in my family's financial records rather than the company's dynamics. After initially discounting my suggestions, my father now consults my mother, who had permitted years of favoritism, advised me on all significant decisions. Cried when she apologized during a private meal. Even Ryan admitted, albeit grudgingly acknowledged, that the business would have vanished without my help, but the most significant change was internally. I had established a prosperous company and no longer required their acknowledgement or permission to prove my value on my terms, then saved the family business according to my values. Come from within rather than from outside approval. A year later, desperate, my mother sent me another note regarding the mortgage. The business turned a profit this quarter. I grinned at the message, but I didn't immediately thank you for preserving our legacy. Instead, I glanced about my Chicago office, taking in the people I had put together and the company I had created from nothing. This was my legacy, not a building name based on merit rather than nepotism, or a business that has been there for decades, but the understanding that I had produced something worthwhile through my eventually responded to my mother later that night, and it was never about. I'm happy to report that the legacy was about appreciating value where it exists rather than where tradition says it should be. You can finally understand that I learned lessons from my path, from being the company's savior to its neglected daughter. Business school could teach you that sometimes the only way to realize your actual worth is to lose everything. It's not selfish to stand by your values, it's necessary, and more importantly, other people's opinions don't matter. Your potential and abilities are not defined by your family either. How about you? Have you ever had to demonstrate your value to those who ought to have seen it sooner? Have you had to set limits with family members to safeguard your self-respect? Please remember to like and subscribe to this video. I would love to hear your stories in the comments section below. For other real-life stories and lessons discovered the hard way, see my channel. Keep in mind that occasionally the people who should be your strongest supporters are those who don't understand your worth until you make it clear to them what they stand to lose. I appreciate you coming along on this adventure with me, and I'll see you in the future video.